How's everyone doing today? We all right? I'm gonna be honest, when I saw cultural developments taking place and I knew Angela wanted me to talk about strategic communication amid social change, I thought about just scrapping my whole talk and talking about Kendrick and Drake, but in the interest of professionalism, I'm not going to do that, but we might be able to talk later about, what happened, It is truly a pleasure to be with you all. My name is Theon Hill, pronouns he, him. I serve as the director of the Center for Faith and Innovation at Wheaton College, and I also serve as a professor there, and I'm just really grateful to be here. I will let you all know that I'm currently on sabbatical. The only reason I'm here right now is because of Angela, because I truly believe in the vision of what she's trying to do in and through her organization in this event. And so I am just grateful for the opportunity to be here with you all. I apologize, I was tardy today. I found out last night / this morning, maybe about 1 a.m., that apparently pre-K graduations are a thing. So my daughter had a graduation first thing this morning that I had to attend. So we made it through that. One of the things that I do in addition to my academic work is I consult for a number of for-profit and non-for-profit organizations. Recently, I was consulting for a non-for-profit organization, and they asked me, Theon, what do we need to do in order to diversify the people that we're serving? And so I said, let me come hang out at your space. Let me see what you do. And so I went and I interviewed some of the folks that they served, and I developed a report, and I presented the report to the initial parties who contracted with me, and it's like, great, is there any way you would deliver this report to our board? I'm like, it's 2024. I'm feeling kind of spicy right now. Let's do it. And so I went to the board, and I told them, well, you really shouldn't be doing this. This is problematic. This is going to be driving away certain marginalized communities. And one board member raised his hand like, Dr. Hill, did you see the Supreme Court decision? I don't know why we're even talking about these things right now. Now, we can be aghast, but this man is still on the board. This is still in a position of power. And so part of what we're talking about is how do we communicate social change strategically? Because if we don't learn how to communicate strategically with that individual, then the efforts to change the cultures of the organizations we participate in, lead, and work in might all be for naught. So I want to talk to you all about that for a few minutes this afternoon. I'm going to give you 3 words to write down. And these 3 words are going to hold the whole presentation together. Irony, universality, and habitual. Irony, universality, and habitual. And we're going to look at these 3 words and what they have to say to us about how to communicate social change strategically. If you all are okay with it, we're going to do this a little differently. We're going to go historically and look at 3 examples. I'm going to tell you 3 stories. These stories are going to feature 3 of my favorite individuals to look at when it comes to social change. One is that good-looking man, Frederick Douglass. I just wish I could take a picture like that. Because we're here in Chicago, we're also going to talk about Chicago's greatest playwright, the great Lorraine Hansberry. And then we're going to go to a U.S. president, Thomas Jefferson. Now, some of you are like, I don't see how all 3 of these fit together. I see 2 that might fit, but how does the 3rd? We're going to get there. Just let us get there. Okay, so let's start with Frederick Douglass. The year is 1852, and he's tasked with delivering a speech to the Rochester Women's Anti-Slavery Society. And he delivers a speech that has gone down in history as one of the greatest anti-slavery orations of all time. It is credited with changing attitudes about that which had become normative in the U.S., and that was viewing other human beings as nothing more than a slave. So we're going to try to unlock what did he do so effectively as a communicator that caused people to see this differently. Let's put a pin in that. I'm going to ask you all a question. Let's go to the civil rights movement. During the civil rights movement, We have this movement for racial change, for economic justice, for women's rights, for LGBTQ plus rights. During the civil rights movement, who were the freest communicators in the nation? This is a question, so we dialogical. Who were the freest communicators? Think of an occupation. I know I'm at a college, but I'm not grading you on this, so there's literally nothing to cost you for getting it wrong. Who are the freest communicators? Preachers? Maybe. I think there's someone even more freer than preachers. Musicians. Why? Okay, that you otherwise, yeah, you can say musicians. I would probably say, we're gonna be in the same camp, so we say the artist. Yes, no, I'm saying musicians are part of that. I might even point to the comedians. Dick Gregory could get up there and say a whole lot of things could nobody else say in the nation at that time. And he said it in a way that people understood. That's why T.S. Eliot says what? Poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. And so if we want to learn something about communicating social change, we need to go back to Frederick Douglass. What does he do in 1852? He gets up there. He goes on for about 5 minutes. Oh, America's this, America's that. But then he stops abruptly in the speech. He's like, wait a second. Why am I invited here today? Because what's the event? It's the 4th of July. And he asks in brilliant profundity, what to the slave is the 4th of July? Now, why is that so important? Because that's an ironic question. Because the 4th of July is all about what? Freedom, liberty, emancipation. And you're asking me, an enslaved person, what is he doing there? He's offering his audience perspective. Let's be clear. Enslaving people was normative in 1852. I don't care where you came from. You were probably used to seeing it. Even if you lived in a so-called free state. Hashtag Dred Scott, you were probably used to seeing enslaved people. It had been normalized, so for him to accomplish culture change, what did he have to do? Provide people with distance from that which had become normalized to them. If you think about your favorite comedian, whoever that is, get them in mind. Your favorite comedian probably makes you laugh because they give you a new perspective on things. And so if you think about the organizations, the cultures that we belong to, how do we utilize simple tools like irony to give people new perspectives? For this board member that I was talking about, I pulled out an example of irony with the issue we were talking about. I was like, let me put this in a way that you can understand. And in trying to put it in, you're just like, oh, I never thought of it like that. All of a sudden, I no longer have an enemy in the changes I'm pushing for them to make in this organization. I think we sell irony too short when we're trying to persuade people to think differently. But it's not just irony. Because irony can help people see things differently, but irony does not make people care, which is why comedians will never lead the movement. We go on. Let's go to Hansberry's Raisin in the Sun. If you've never read the play, if you've never seen a performance of it, if you've never watched the movie, not the Diddy version, but the Sidney Poitier version, I want to be clear on who I'm promoting here. Especially now. Anyway. If you've never seen this play, she becomes the first black playwright to win the New York Drama Circle Critics Award for the best play in 1957. She's beaten out Eugene O'Neill, Tennessee Williams, the Mount Rushmore of playwrights. One of the things about this play, it's set squarely on the South Side. It's about a poor black family that's just trying to make it. But this play has been translated into over 33 languages. It's been performed in Czechoslovakia. It was performed in East Berlin when there wasn't East Berlin. It's been performed in China, but it's about a family, unmistakably, on the South Side. What gives it its portability? Hansberry was very clear about this. She's dealing with topics like redlining, restrictive covenants, colonialism, sexism. It's been translated over 30 languages. In an interview with Studs Terkel, she said, sometimes you have to create the universal, you have to pay attention to the particular. What's the whole message here? Are you able to connect the issues in the organizational culture that you're targeting with universal concerns? What does that do? It gives people entry points to empathize, to sympathize, to relate to whatever it is you're talking about. But so many times we try to force people to care before giving them space to relate to it. If communication studies taught us anything in the 20th century, it taught us this: before you can persuade people, you have to first identify with them. And if we don't take that step of identifying our concerns with theirs, we're going to find it really difficult to try to shift the cultures and the cultural norms that we're trying to challenge. Okay, so first, irony. Give them distance. Number 2, universal. Connect it with their concerns. Number 3, we're going to TJ. Thomas Jefferson is a fascinating human being. President, prolific author, slave owner. When I teach as a professor, one of my primary things I teach about is race and politics. Everything controversial. It's going to be a really fun year. But I always point to Thomas Jefferson when people ask me to understand racism in America. I was speaking in Indonesia about a year ago, and they asked, can you help us understand race in America? And I was like, I pulled up this quote by Thomas Jefferson. Just look at what he says. This is in a 2-page article. There must doubtless be an unhappy influence on the manners of our people produced by the existence of slavery among us. The whole commerce between master and slave is a perpetual exercise of the most boisterous passions, the most unremitting despotism on the one part, and degrading submission on the other. Look at that last phrase. Our children see this and learn to imitate it. You want to understand U.S. racism? Understand habit formation. You can't understand where we're at today without understanding habits. But what does this do if we talk about it in the context of habits? That's a new way for me to engage some of the cultural dynamics that we're facing in any type of organization, because this tells us not just what we're dealing with, but how we got to this point. So often when we talk about some of the hot button DEI topics, it becomes to the person you're speaking with an ad hominem attack. They feel like you're attacking them as the individual. But when we shift the conversation, not downplay the severity of it, but say, here's how we got to this point. Now they're able to see what you're talking about as part of a broader constellation of cultural dynamics that have shaped them both consciously and unconsciously. It gives us a way of intervening into problematic behavior. What do we say? We started with the idea of irony, give them distance. Number 2, connect them to the universal. Why does this matter to you? Number 3, reinsert them. That's what habits gives us to do. So we might not ever think about the fact, yes, I look at people like this way, and I've been habituated into that kind of behavior. But when we introduce the language of habit formation, now we have a language to identify why we do what we do and how to change it. So let's just quickly review. Douglas pushes us to acknowledge marginalized perspectives. And one of the primary ways that we can do this is through a communicative tool of irony. Number 2, Hansberry. In A Raisin in the Sun, she challenges us to link forms of injustice that permeate our cultures with universal human experience. This next year, I'm taking a group from a nonprofit I consult for. We're actually going down to Costa Rica to do some work. This is a group of physicians and medical professionals, because they're like, hey, we want to understand this issue that we're seeing in migrant busing better. I was like, we're going down to the source, because in Costa Rica, they're facing an influx of migrants on the other side coming from Nicaragua. And we're going to go experience this because it's going to transform how you all understand your positionality and your response to what's happening here on the streets of Chicago. Number 3, Jefferson teaches us to address evolving forms of injustice in the language. Like, think about this. This is a slave owner writing this. He understands what's happening here, even though he's complicit with it and part of it. He's still afraid of it. This is doing something to us too. And when he uses that language of, I'm afraid of this, This has a negative effect. He shows this is why it matters to everybody. What I'm trying to suggest to you all is that culture change requires strategic approaches to the way that we message the change that we're trying to achieve in the communities that we belong to. If we can be intentional about that, we have a chance to disrupt the normative realities that drive so many people away from the organizations we participate in. Now let me welcome Kim back to the stage.
More love for Dr. Hill, please. I was so in it with him. Oh, me? Oh, okay, got it. All right, give me a minute because I want to, thank you.